Hi, welcome to Monetizing Innovation. I'm John Holcomb, the best-selling author of Creating Value Faster. Innovation isn't just the big idea on the whiteboard. It's the hard decisions, the missed signals, and the leaders who keep moving forward anyway. This show dives into real stories behind breakthroughs in life sciences, healthcare, and tech, how ideas become results, how teams align under pressure, and how strategy turns into execution. If you're building something bold or looking for clarity to lead with confidence, you're in the right place. Press play and let's turn innovation into impact. And I'm really excited to introduce today. We have a great guest, Carlos Beatty Jr., co-founder of Resumation. And it's a platform focused on turning careers into structured data to improve hiring, mobility, and opportunity at scale. With a background in engineering and experience at Amazon, Carlos is building at the intersection of AI, workforce data, and talent innovation. He also serves as board governor with ASME, bringing a systems-level perspective to how people and organizations grow. Join us as we explore innovation in hiring, leadership, and how data is reshaping the future of work. Thank you, Carlos, for joining today. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. John, thanks for having me.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Carlos, it was great. I know we were able to have a couple conversations, and one of the things I really thought was exciting for the audience today, especially as we talk about monetizing innovation, is you've had an interesting journey, right, to get to Resumation and start driving this, and really a unique perspective, right, on bringing value and changing how we look at the hiring process moving forward. So with that, I was hoping maybe you could just introduce yourself from your background and perspective and go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Carlos Beatty Jr., co-founder of Resumation. And really, Resumation started a couple of years ago, just simply as a way to help individuals tell their unique story. Now, and in the time, and even now, arguably, we do that in the form of a resume, right? To at least get that first step in to get that interview. So something that I had learned over the years working in industry, helping people literally create resumes in corners of coffee shops and bars, is it's really hard to tell that story. So I started thinking like, how can we make it to where we can capture these stories, these stories that sit in your mind and maybe appear as highlights on a resume or highlights on your LinkedIn, and then you tell a couple of those stories in an interview and get it all into one spot. Because once it's all there, then as somebody who's trying to craft it, you can be like, hey, like we can do something with that. We can create a resume. We can understand a little bit more about what makes us unique, especially in the workforce. So that's really the how Resumation started. And over the years we've been doing this, we've adapted to how technology has changed and how hiring in the industry has changed. And what we found out was in the advent of, I will say, generative AI and being accessible, our thesis is the resume doesn't really make as much sense anymore as a foundational data set because it's only a glimpse of what you bring to the table. So if you've got technology that can help take a lot of information and interpret it, then what can you do with that, right? And we're building out the next phase of Resumation called Resumation Nexus to essentially answer that question. How do you get these rich experiences and career stories and get it in a way to where you can do a bunch of things with it, whether it be create documents, plug into jobs to be able to understand what your next piece of work goes for on the user side. And then on the company side, which is where we're exploring right now, is when you have all this information, how do you actually use it or how do you access it in a way that it makes sense for everyone? And so that's what we're pursuing now. And again, this idea, I said a lot here, but it's all really based on problem solving. Throughout my entire career, I've always tried to find the hard problems, especially where technology intersects, we'll say, operations, engineering. I love to solve in that space because it's a hard space to be in. And I've done that again, since the beginning of my career, always trying to chase the hard problems that are on the edge of innovation, wherever in the industry innovation is set. So super excited to talk about that a little bit more. Again, Resumation is the current journey that I'm on, but I love problem solving with good people. So if there's a hard problem and good people, count me in.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things I know when we were chatting before, right? That's really fascinating about what you're doing with Resumation. The industry it is a little bit dated, right? Resumes have been around for how long? And I think like we shared, right? It is just a snapshot, and we're now living in a data-rich environment. So when you think about like, what really brought you to that idea of the problem, and then who did you kind of validate that problem with when you were starting this journey?
It's a great question. So again, I've really started thinking about this problem when I was figuring out. So I talked about where I used to help people with resumes, and even that's the genesis of the earliest version of Resumation, right? How you make a better, really much better resume. And what I've realized is a lot of folks, including myself and probably many people who are listening to this, it's really hard to make a good resume. It really is. And what does good even mean, right? And there are a lot of opinions on what good is, and I think it's don't get me wrong, I'm not dogging on the resume completely. I think it's a great artifact for like a quick snapshot. And then if you think about the world that hiring has lived in, like you have folks are reading resumes, right? And even with filtering systems and everything, like at the end of the day, a lot of it is manual, which I think is a good thing, asterisk. But it's a snapshot. And I think it gives and it's also a good sales document. Can you tell your story very concisely, right? The reality is there's not everyone's great at that, and nor should they be, right? Some people are just great at what they do, and they're great at other things, and they just want to work and do the best they can, right? Let alone just like create the sales this document. But it has its place. So I really wanted to challenge the notion of what it means to tell that story and then to connect with folks that want to hear it in a way that makes sense, right? Because the reality is, if you've got like a huge data dump of your career stories. And yes, it's structured and everything, but it's a lot to read. It's going to take you a little bit more than 6 to 7 seconds. My theory was, okay, well, if we have I know AI can't be used throughout, and this is a big thing. I'm sure we'll talk about this later. Very high point of conviction that I have. You should not be using AI for everything because you can't really see what AI is doing underneath the hood. Not really. We're not there yet. So how do you use AI to understand the story and then get it to a point where you can create a mechanism to bring these two worlds together, the hiring and the job seeker, in a way that makes sense and is most importantly transparent, and gets you that speed without having to sacrifice transparency. So when I think about validation, I actually and still do. I reach out to former hiring managers that I've worked with, recruiters, HR, CEOs, CFOs, HROs. Like I'm all over the place, getting different perspectives. And some of the learnings that I've gotten out of this is there's a really big gap in the AI use case, and the gap really is it's hard to trust it because when it goes wrong, it goes wrong. And then you can't audit what it is. So like there's a lot of things you can do to find and discover hidden talent in your ecosystem to go and do recruiting faster and everything, right? But if you can't really trust what the AI is doing because there's no visibility, that becomes a problem in itself. There's a second piece of this, which is I've talked to a few folks where they've been like, oh, I'm trying to find people or I'm trying to analyze people, but it starts to hallucinate. Like it's telling me things that don't exist. And my feedback usually is like, well, if you're using surface level data and you're asking deep questions, it's not going to know because there's nothing there to support it. So it's going to hallucinate. It makes sense. Or it's going to tell you, I don't know, for the more sophisticated models. And so as I started to get this feedback and started to hard test, does this deep profile and then accessing that data make sense? The conclusive conclusion is yes, it makes sense. The hard part is twofold. One is implementing it because it's easier said than done to think about everyone with huge profiles and then to go and analyze it. There's a bunch of obstacles there, right? And then the second thing is we live in the world of resumes. So this is not a resume. You can make one, but this is fundamentally different. So there's been this hurdle that I've been working through, and I'm not alone. There are a few others that are doing this too in the industry of trying to bring together the hiring and talent world with what is happening at the cutting edge of, we'll say, AI ML, to bring these two worlds together to create a solution that makes sense for everyone. But this isn't something that happens overnight. This is something that takes time. So I've joined the group to see what we can do to come to a good consensus together, because it's only going to just make this a fair and more delightful experience for folks, is my conviction.
I think that so powerful what you highlighted on a couple different fronts, right? Was one, that you have to utilize AI in the right way. It does take that human insight. But two, and I guess maybe that's the next question that I have for you is how do you utilize then that AI? Because some of the systems even now, right, building your job descriptions, right, and even the AI keywords and things like that. So it almost becomes a little bit circular. How do you see working through that in the
Yeah.
future?
So I'll start with my framework on this, and this is a hot take, so I'm sure I'll get the feedback and maybe it'll change, but it's my hot take of the day. AI is not just a tool. It's and this maybe just words, but AI is not just a tool. It's an unlock. It's a capability unlock. And here's what I mean by this. So today you see generative, and I'm going to focus on generative AI for most of this discussion. You use a chatbot. You can search for, I need to find, let's just pretend we're looking for somebody in your workforce. And you say, hey, or in a talent pool, I'm like, hey, I'm looking for somebody with strategic planning, right? But what will happen today, and it's just the different systems, different capabilities, but it'll look for that keyword and then it'll go in and search and do this. And this is just straight up just search. We call it search, right? What I'm pushing for, where I think AI can be used very well, is it's one thing to know what you want. And a lot of search, if you go on any kind of search, whatever, you have to know what you want, and that kind of gets you there based on keywords. But it's another thing to search for outcomes or context that doesn't necessarily have to rely on a keyword. So where I've been pushing is this switch from search to AI contextual search, which is instead of saying I'm looking for somebody with strategic planning, maybe you'll say, hey, we're looking for a new role that is really going to help us move to the next level in terms of our innovation capabilities and AI, that needs to be able to run our strategic planning cycle and work with finance and everything. There's like a lot of this context that adds up in there, right? The result of that, like there's a lot of things that you can derive from there that are implied and not implied. And I think where AI can do a really good job is like interpret what you say. Hey, this is what I got out of it. What do you think? Is there something that I'm missing? And it becomes more of an advisor relationship with you to get to the point where you both can agree on something that you want to go after, an outcome. And then based on that outcome with context, then go and find what that is. And I think when you move to the then go and find, depending on where you're doing and in this hiring things, I think that's where AI needs to stop. And I think that's where more deterministic formulas or even arguably manual intervention, but like I would say, with more transparent means can go and find that and bring that together. And that's what we do with our tool Resumation Nexus. It uses AI for interpretation and does a lot of that heavy lifting and works with you to get to that. And then when you have requirements essentially that are clear, then it brings it together using formulas. We have our own formulas to do this to get you somewhere. And even when you get that, then it can help you start to tweak and understand like, hey, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? Why? And that context again becomes more of that advisor relationship, which is where I think AI can do a very good job and not the full gambit of making a decision for you. Agentic capabilities, for example, now today, I like where it's going. I like the capability, but I get worried that sometimes as practitioners, we are letting the AI do too much. And that might be okay if it has the context, but if it doesn't have the context, it'll put something in there, but it may not be what you actually are looking for because you didn't say anything. It makes sense. How is an AI or any person going to know what you want if you don't tell it, right? So that is something that goes beyond just resumation and hiring. It's like AI needs data, needs context to work well. And that's assuming the model is great, right? And the sooner that practitioners and leaders have a good conversation about this, I think the better. That's when true AI, generative AI, is going to unlock. Until then, we're going to come up with a lot of great tools, a lot of great models, a lot of good capabilities, but the results are not going to match expectation, especially as the bar for expectation starts to grow. Can't do it without data. And that's why I'm convicted that our solution and this idea of a profile versus a resume, no matter what is the future, the question is, what is it going to look like? And when is it going to become more commonplace? I'm happy to be wrong about that, but that is my points of conviction.
No, I really I appreciate that perspective too, because I think it's so powerful. You're highlighting that, AI is a powerful tool that we can utilize, right? But if we're not applying the human insight, and sometimes too, I think what you pointed out, like even on the front end, right? If we're not clear on the requirements, then the tool's only as good as what we asked it to do, right? So
Yeah, and we can't expect people to know what they want right off the bat. Like, how many times have you searched for shopping for something on Google or anything like that, and you discover? And I think discovery is beautiful. Like, we should be able to go through that and have an advisor with us. In this case, we'll call it AI to help us get there, and not feel
absolutely.
like it's trying to force a decision down our throat. Right? We should be working together as partners with AI, and that's where I want to keep it, at least for now.
And I think that's so fantastic, right? Because I think for whether it's an executive of a large company or, a new entrepreneur, really being able to experiment with the AI tools like that, right? And actually learn how to refine. It's like, okay, I asked it this, it gave me why. Why is not what I want. So let me go look and refine like what I'm asking, because obviously I didn't ask quite the right question, right? And that experimentation cycle, I think, is how we innovate.
Yep, yep, 100%, 100%.
No, and I just think it's so fantastic as you look at that too, of applying sort of that approach to something that is so human centric, right? We think about new hires or experienced hires, and it's such a personal human topic. The AI tool can really be powerful if we start training it, right? And I'm glad you specified agentic AI versus, because there are other aspects that folks, I think in the media, right, we get it all a little bit jumbled and mixed up.
Yeah. But and it's okay. And I've worked in AI/ML over the last few years. And I'm no like data scientist expert or anything, right? By any means. But I've been reading and seeing how AI is being used in the space and agentic and everything. And it's really hard to piece out like what it actually means. And even with the agentic, like to be able to like take a goal and then to go and execute upon it without having the human always intervening. I think that capability is great, right? It's arguably what is happening between like some of the huge facing models that exist today. Not arguably, what's happening to a certain degree. I just worry that again, there's just a fundamental of AI ML, that the data component of it and the context, that without that, it just, again, how can you expect something to know what you want if you're not trying to understand what that is? Assuming that you know it, you have to say it. And if you don't know it, how do you get to that point where you feel good about what you're actually trying to go after? It's hard, but that's why we're all innovating in this space right now.
No, absolutely. One of the things, I guess, just on that front too, to me, your journey has been quite fascinating, right? Because you have done engineering, you've worked for large companies, Amazon, others, and you've worked on various aspects, right? And actually, I believe you mentioned even some of the mining work and things like that as well. And so it's really fascinating. You've worked for these really large companies, and now you're in the midst of, the startup. And what were some of those lessons for you?
So great question, John. So for context for the audience, my career path has been quite maybe unique, and maybe it'd be a good candidate for a full Resumation profile. But I actually started off in mining. I went to the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, a traditionally mining school, but it's nowadays very much focused on science and engineering, and does a great job of producing what I call like industry-ready engineers. Fantastic education. And my first job out of school was actually in mining. And why is because I wanted to work somewhere where you could identify a problem, brainstorm and design a solution, and then implement it right away. So like software, you can do this, but coming out of school, it's like software wasn't my immediate. So it's like, where can you go and find this? Well, mining is a great place to go and do this because problems happen all the time. You have to think on your feet, and then you have to literally go in and build or dig or do what you need to do. And it's got to be in a way, it can't just be like, you can't just rush it. I mean, there's huge safety considerations about everything. It's physical. So if you move dirt from one place to another, it's going to be really hard to go and undo that change, right? So it's I loved it. And what I learned there was how to think on your feet, and how to mix innovation and innovative thinking with practical realities. And that's where that really got reinforced. I've worked in automotive, both in advanced manufacturing as well as in the big three, traditionally Chrysler,
Sure.
GM, Ford. Different aspects. So, I mean, I was in engineering during corporate planning. Engineering for corporate planning is a very weird combo, but strategy needs engineering too, right? So doing that, and then on the other side, doing internal audit, and almost like an internal consulting function across everything, accounting, finance, process engineering, what you name it, we touched that. And it was a good way to find problems and opportunities and then help drive those with the executives and the teams, which I absolutely loved. I worked in utilities, doing grid intelligence and distribution construction, two completely different worlds, arguably. But the whole thing was, and if you haven't noticed this trend, I like to build and innovate, and I like to solve problems. So on the distribution construction side, like there's a lot of just operational things that happen. So it was really cool to learn about the business and the practical realities of how things work, and then help refine and tweak along the way. And then on the other side, like coming up with a grid intelligence modernization strategy, which is, everyone at the time was just figuring out themselves, was super cool because it meant doing research. It meant thinking outside the box. How are EVs going to impact the grid? What needs to change if that's the case? How are EV companies and utilities talking to each other? If not, what does that conversation need to be like? Like super, super, super cool. And then with Amazon, I worked in a couple different elements, but I think the theme of it was how do you supercharge innovation when not that time is up against you, but like when you need to move, right? And I've worked in a startup in the company, which was I think was a startup like environment in the company, which I think was great with the Just Walk Out technology group, and then everything from there, from like very like that's stable, but mature model moving in the selling partner space. But I loved it because it gave me a chance to see how innovation works in different lenses, and I there's something very like core to what I see, which is there are certain types of people, leaders, and drivers for different parts of a company's journey. So, like, you're going to have a very different leader and practitioner of innovation and just leadership at a 0 to 1 startup company that you would maybe from like a very like mature, stable. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's just a shift of the mindset to tweak how you approach or how innovation remains in the culture, right? And John, I think you've got some great thoughts on this. I would love to hear kind of your thoughts on this. But I have recognized that there are differences in what you need, and it's important, I think, as a founder, as a manager, as a leader, to recognize when you need to start making those shifts, and then to work with folks to understand what that is for your culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think you highlight two like really critical elements. One is being a student of the business. It's that curiosity. How do I look at what is the problem to be solved? What, like, is it a real problem? It doesn't matter. And then I think the other one that you really highlight is I do think there's a very much so a leadership awareness, right? And I kind of like to think of it as a little bit of a leadership arc where, where you highlight, it's like you do need different skill sets at different parts of the business. And it's like not one's not better than the other. It's just, you either have to be that special individual that can be a little schizophrenic and shift, right?
Yeah.
Knowing the situational awareness of here's where I'm at, or you need to actually have the right leader in those positions. I'm more in favor of having those that are self-aware, right? That can understand the need for the shift and how to meet the teams where they're at. And I think, from what you're sharing, you're very much in that sort of perspective.
Percent. And actually, even with what we're building, like we have this, depending on where you are in this growth cycle, this innovation cycle, you're probably going to have multiple employees. You're going to have multiple folks with capabilities, and you hired them for a reason, for something that you needed, right? But as things shift, you're going to need different skills. You're going to need different capabilities. Different roles start to pop up, and our belief at Resumation is, um, you probably have the talent you need. You just don't know who they are and what they've done because you've interviewed them on a resume. Yeah, you've worked with them maybe
Yeah.
if you've worked with them intimately, but like you probably don't know who they are. So what do you default to? You default to hiring externally, which isn't a bad thing. But it could be long term if that means that there's that you're not investing in your people and the culture, because at the end of the day, another hot take is culture dominates, and you could have the best strategy, you could have the best operational practices, and it could move things along. I've seen over the years, culture usually wins. So it's super important to craft and to maintain that culture, and then to work with the folks that also want to champion that, right? Not saying go with the flow. I mean, you want people who challenge status quo, right? But you do want to maintain your culture, which means retaining the talent that you want. So what we want to be able to do is provide leaders with that ability to look into their existing populations and have that conversation with
Right.
the platform and with their peers to start to develop teams rapidly. Because what would you rather do? Would you rather you're starting to move out of 0 to 1, you're starting to get to more, you need to start to grow the company. So you need folks that can drive, push things forward, maybe even sales. And then you start to look and let's just say I've got folks that are working in completely different areas that have these skill sets in a previous life. Let's find them, mobilize them, and get them moving in a matter of weeks versus, oh no, I need to go hire a brand new team for this. And let me say it's at least 3 months if you're fast to go
Yeah.
and find these people, another 3 to 6 months to get them ready and up to your culture. And assuming you don't have issues along the way, like there's a competitive advantage there. So we really do think that this idea of being able to shift and adapt with the changes of your company and your needs is super essential. And then when you do go outside to go find somebody, to be able to find the right folks, because I don't know about you, John, making a wrong hiring decision can do a doozy on a company. And I was talking to I was talking to one particular small business owner that said, at his stage the difference between hiring somebody who's really good and is a good match and not just for the company but also for the person, right? That it's a relationship. It can be the difference between the company succeeding or going out of business. He's like, it's that important. So I don't think it's less important for a bigger company. Maybe just the impacts are not as significant until they start to happen at scale.
No, I think that's so true, right? And like you said, a larger company, they might be able to absorb a little bit of that shock, but it can tear that group apart as well, right? Especially depending on at what level of leadership, the mistake may happen. Yeah, I think what you highlight too, and I think it's really important, right? It's that power of we really having those multiple cross-functional skill sets that folks can, really solve a plethora of problems. But I think the other aspect that you highlighted in there, and I think it's just so important, right, is you need both, like that internal and external, because the internal folks need to have that growth runway, right? Whether it's to proceed on a technical track, as an example, or a leadership track. And not all technical folks, right, we know are not necessarily the best leaders, especially if they're great technologists. Don't force them to do something they don't love.
100%. But again, how are you going to know this unless you have a good working relationship with them and you understand? I feel like sometimes the decisions are a little bit farther away from the strategic decisions, a little bit farther away from the folks that can help get you there. And again, we talked a bunch about the hiring side. I actually think there's a huge compelling side on the other side. Like if you nobody, I don't think I've yet to find people who want to go to work and just like they're just like, how can I disrupt everything today? And not everyone wants to do well, right? And what I found out that like usually when there's a mismatch of the company and the employee or the candidate and the employee, it's not to do with like intent or anything. It's just this to fit just doesn't make sense, right? And then you put this person in another type of role, maybe something that's stronger fit, something that they can feel passionate about. It's like night and day difference in the outcomes, right? Or with a company with a culture, right? I would love to see, and the reason why we're piloting this right now, this capability resumation nexus with companies is I would love to see what this looks like when you have the context and you have the history and you can get the day to day what did I do and everything all loaded in. Does that start to change the kinds of conversations and eventual decisions that these companies and folks make? I don't know about you. For me, I would not want to work somewhere or in a role where I cannot be me or showcase the skills that I bring to the table, especially if I have the option. I want to find a good match. Just how do you do that? And I just don't, the solutions that are out there today, I just don't, they're great, but they don't know who I am because they don't have the context. I haven't told you yet. So how can you match me, or how can I find the right role, or how can I meet the right teams, and vice versa if you don't know who I am? It's
I completely agree. And I laugh a little bit. I think early in my career, sometimes I was referred to as a bull in a china shop.
oh yeah,
And part of it was, right, because it's like you could see what the problem was. And it was like, okay, why don't we just address the problem? And of course, that was the mature business. But then put me in the like new business development, and it was like, oh, this is the best fit ever.
yeah. Oh yes, oh yes.
So but actually, I will say that those were some of the best feedback moments. Right, was actually that talk about self awareness when somebody calls you a bull in the china shop. You're like, okay, I think I need to pay attention now.
Oh yes, oh yes. They're good learning lessons, but also, sometimes I don't know about you, like you start to see there are just some things that are just uniquely you. You operate a certain way in a certain, and if that's your superpower, then go find where you could become Superman.
Absolutely. And it was so funny because I think as I moved more into some of that leadership realm, and I'm sure you experienced a lot of this too, to me, the best situation was when you'd recognize some of the folks that were like really these fuzzy front end, brilliant folks. And then you had like more of the process structure folks. And that's where sometimes that team conflict could come into play, right?
Yep.
Because they're speaking a different language. And I'd have to come in and try to say, okay, like interpret, right, for both of them. Because it's like, the process folks were upset because there wasn't a spec, and the product folks were like, but we've never made this before. It's first to the world.
They're some of the hardest conversations to have, but you know what? Super important because if you don't, then otherwise the conversation just says this. And it's like, but we got to move. So like,
But those are the things that, right? That's what helps you grow, and that's what I just find so fascinating, especially with the business concept you're driving, is because really trying to take some of these insights, right, and some of these experiences, and if we can understand better, right, we can create some of these linkages. It'll never be perfect, but it can certainly help, make some of these things that just don't come out on a resume.
yep. And there's an important element of this. If I were sitting in the audience right now, I would absolutely poke or ask this question or something near it. It's like there's a strong human element. We haven't talked like we're talking a lot about the technology and some of the things, but like I want to be super clear. Technology can do a lot of things. Look at technological innovations over the years. Like it does a lot of things that it helps us move faster, better, etc. But there are just some things technology is going to have a harder or impossible time of really doing. And at the end of the day, like people work and people are solve with people and teams. Part of it is because they like doing the thing that they're doing and or they like the people. It's going to be really hard for AI to even intercept because it's a very human thing. And even if AI could get there, I'm sure humanity will kind of put a line and say, no, there's certain things that are just uniquely human, right? But where I start there, it's kind of like, out in the clouds, but like to bring it back to reality, it's like, where I don't think AI should be, another hot take. I don't think it should be automating interviews. I don't think it should be your manager, right? And like these are things that even if it did a better job, I have a fundamental belief that it is still important for a human to do this. Now, where I'm pushing is I think there are other elements that are human today that can be more unbiased, fair, and faster for the betterment of everyone. And I think what the conversation that I've been having with leaders when getting into AI is it's yes about the technology and everything, but it's also like the how are we starting to influence like where we start to draw some of these lines for the importance of the company culture, business, and moving, right? There are going to be some companies that want to automate everything. Totally cool. You do what you got to do. But I have the companies that I've talked to, the sense that I get is they want to use AI that's more than just a chatbot, but they don't want it to be everything. So where do we start to draw that line and what does that look like? And for now, what I do for today, it's in the hiring space and learning as much as I can and working with folks to try and figure out what that is and running these pilots to figure out where does this line set and then how do we develop some technology around it and work with others to create this new hiring form ecosystem, whatever this looks like, right? But then I don't think it's just for hiring. It exists in other places too. The question is like, how are we deploying AI, these new technologies in a way that makes sense? And as it gets closer to people, how are we making sure that we're not leaving folks behind, that it's, again, transparent, that it's fair, and it's effective? And these are hard questions. I'd lie to you if I say I had answers. I have some perspectives, but even those are changing as things change. It's a conversation I'm sure a lot of folks on listening to this are having or folks on their teams are having.
I completely agree with you. And I think, when you think about AI, it really, in my mind, accentuates the human factor. And those that are actually employing AI effectively have recognized that you can't take the human element out, but what you can do is help look at what are the routine things, what are some of the things that AI can just be excellent at, and that's where the competitive advantage can come in about how do you speed up or become more competitive because you can have a lower cost basis.
Yep. Or how do you unlock something that just wasn't possible before, right? And again, like there are use cases like where if you just rethink the model in which you're doing business or doing your product, like it completely changes the game, and your human element shifts in what it means and where you go. It's going to look different. But I actually think the companies and leaders that are thinking, what new unlock can I drive from AI in a use case that's maybe like not so obvious. I think that is going to be the winners. And there are a few folks that are doing this. Like I give the example of like their Google AI mode or like Open AI. They've got these capabilities where again you can do intent based or contextual based search. You can say you can talk about, you can voice rant, you can do all these things, and then it'll help you get to what you're looking for. And I strongly think that that's one example of like something different, and it changes the way you look at things because maybe there's I don't know if it's the case, but like anytime you do anything AI, there's typically needs to be some kind of like annotation or human in the loop type of thing. What you look for and how you look for it and validate and have accuracy, all these types of things you'll need humans to do something somewhere, training or something. So the question is, what does that look like? And then how are you using it in a way that is beneficial for everyone? That is, again, I don't have the answers to these. But I imagine as folks are rolling out their tech stacks and they're rolling out their capabilities, these are the types of things that they're thinking about. And if they're not, then good conversations to have with folks that are.
Absolutely. And I think it highlights your earlier point, right, of just that need for that learning mindset to really be open-minded to, is there a different approach, or what am I learning, right, from this new data set?
Hmm.
Is this the best method to utilize AI or not? Yeah. No, I think it's so fascinating. I think it's so exciting with the work that you're truly pioneering, right? I would say in terms of the HR side of it, right, with resumes and talking about, really objective performance metrics for different, associates, employees. That's so powerful because the more you can understand, it does shift your framework a little bit.
Yep. Yep, 100%. And and even for the employees and the candidates, the user side, right? For me, like I have I think I've had an exciting career. I've still got more to go. And it's really hard to synthesize. What does it mean? What does my career mean? What have I done? And so what, right? And what are my superpowers? All these things. So we've tried to build this in a way that is also super enjoyable for them, because otherwise it's just another tool. It's another database, another thing I need to fill out, right? But instead we want to make it so like how great to be able to like understand what you've done and like what you give off to be like who you are in terms of something like an AI saying, hey, this is what I read. You tell me what you think, what you don't think, and then maybe help fill in the gaps of where you either have the experience but didn't say anything, or maybe there's new skill sets or experiences you need to go after, right? I think it's super important that again, this whenever you roll out AI or any kind of technology, it works for everyone involved. So we're trying to also balance that in terms of making sure that the employee candidate experience is enjoyable. So you can. I've done this, by the way. I practice what I preach. I'm using. I have my entire profile in there, and I can ask questions like, what are some of my weaknesses, right? That is giving off in my profile, or where are my strengths, or what do I like to do? And even like I had a hunch that I like to problem solve and build, and even if it meant like pioneering in spaces where people would feel uncomfortable otherwise. Like I had a feeling, but it's kind of validating to be able to like find that out with the AI as your companion, and then for it to go and pull examples to actually that from your deep profile to actually go and show you why that's the case, right? So it feels more validating, and then you can actually say yay or nay, and you can go back and forth, right? You can do this with humans too. I actually argue it's better with humans, but to have a good starting point and to be able to like do some self-exploration, I think this is a great use case of where I think AI can help. And I've used it on myself, and it's helped me really orient some of my career decisions in the last couple of years to be a little bit more focused and better.
It's funny you say that because it is. It's very powerful, right? Because it can sharpen, maybe that statement that you're trying to make about yourself, right? Where
Yep.
you had like the right general direction, but by asking some of the questions, it really refines and clarifies.
Yep. 100%. I agree. I agree.
I tell you what, Carlos, this has been so fantastic talking with you today. As you think about, some of the other innovators, other folks in the audience that are out there, are there any other, uh, I would say, things that you'd want to share or words of advice that you'd want to make sure, especially as folks are really trying to dive into this space and build, their own ideas?
It's a good question. I'd say stay curious and move fast. Stay curious because it's really easy, especially when you've got a good product and you're rocking and rolling, you're getting new deals, or maybe you're steady state and it's really easy to get lost in everything going on. And there's a rule that I follow. This might be slightly contrary, but there's a rule that I follow. It's like you try to take everything, it's like the signal noise problem. Try and bring everything down to the one, two, maybe three most important things, and then just really focus, like hyper focus on those until they're done, right? And in an extreme, I think that works really well for what you're trying to do. But the other problem with that is you're not open to what's going on around you all the time. So either through others or just allocating time for yourself, try and find those moments to stay curious to see what's going on around you, because that's going to let you know whether you need to shift your one, two, maybe three things. And for those that can, in a way that is disciplined, I think they're going to be very well off in terms of like good focus, getting stuff done, and showcasing that to the world. I think it's really cool. The second piece is move fast. When you're focused, you can move fast. Hopefully, you can still move fast. But in today's day and age, especially if you're in software or anything touching software, speed is essential. Like now you've got folks that can stand up applications, competitive products and everything. And if they do it, if they can do it quick in a couple hours, sure, right? But with their scalability issue of doing that. But let's just say they can do it quick. What a dev cycle might take a year to build, maybe you can do it in a month, right? Or two, which means that it's becoming less and less. We're not there yet, but it's becoming less and less like about like speed in terms of building itself, but more speed in terms of getting to a decision and then going and doing the build. It's the package deal. So like if you can start to implement a little bit of that innovation thinking in terms of like, what are the meta things? What are the things that I'm going after? So your essentially your objective outcomes, right? And then your strategy on how to go and achieve that. And then you can find ways to accelerate those outcomes. I think they're going to be the ones that are going to do well because then you're actually doing something, and then you can go find out if it works or not, and you can you fail fast. Essentially, you can go fail fast and move on. But if you're not learning and failing fast, then somebody else is going to be, which means that they're going to have knowledge and learnings that you don't. So by the time, hopefully, you get to it quickly, but let's just say you don't get to it until you have a mature product with teams and everything, and then you realize that something that you've done is that you could have learned quickly earlier than somebody else did. Like you set yourself up for a heavier tech debt. Cost another way. Like, so my advice is stay curious, again, and move fast, fail fast, and it's okay. Like failure's okay. Failure's not okay if you fail and keep failing on the same thing. Like learn and move on, right? But and again, this seems like easy, right? Like every person on a podcast says this, but I really do mean it. It's easy to say it, and it's easy to say it in a meeting, and it's easy to kind of say it on these things, but to actually go and live it and to do it and to make it cultural is hard. If you can do that, I think depending on your company and what's going on, like I think it could be a game changer.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful what you highlight, right? Because it's sort of the polarity, right? It's the polarity of the discipline with the polarity of the open-mindedness, and you have to kind of shift back and forth, right?
Yes.
Depending on the time. Otherwise, you can't have the rapid learning cycles. And so, no, I thank you for sharing that perspective. I think that's truly valuable. No, Carlos, this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the dialogue and would love to be able to have us check in with you here in the near future as you progress to the next level, because it's really exciting, the work that you're doing.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Likewise, I really appreciate it, and we'll definitely look forward to having you on the next episode of Monetizing Innovation in the near future.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.